Hi, I'm Robin Vitucci. On behalf of the AFT, welcome to Teaching. This is the second episode of our new conversation series that gives real-time insights into the goals, challenges, and successes of two early career teachers. Each episode, they are joined by a veteran educator, an expert, or an AFT leader in professional development to hear their stories and provide some guidance on this journey of teaching. If you missed our first episode where we focused on classroom management, please visit AFT's sharemylesson.com. All episodes, including this one and accompanying resources, will be shared there. Now let's get to this month's conversation, Children's Well-Being, with a specific focus on trauma-informed practice. Our teachers, once again, are Sam and Kelly. Why don't you two remind everyone a little bit about your teaching experience?
Hi, I'm Kelly Stanifer. I'm a second-year teacher in a third and fourth grade autism unit in Cincinnati Public Schools. Last year, I taught in a different autism unit at a different school, and I went to UC, so I'm home-based in Cincinnati.
And I'm Sam Ramey. I'm currently a seventh grade social studies teacher, also in Cincinnati Public Schools. This is my second year in CPS at the same school, and my third year overall. Prior to Cincinnati, I was in Chicago, and then I student taught in Columbus, where I was doing my student teaching and master's program.
Thanks. And now I'm going to introduce our expert for this episode. Jim Arey is a seasoned social science educator, retired after serving Elk Grove Village High School for 34 years. He currently holds the position of a national trainer for the AFT, specializing in student trauma and supporting students with grief and loss. Alongside his instructional responsibilities, he dedicated his efforts to steering the District 214 Education Association as its president and played a pivotal role in affiliating with the Illinois Federation of Teachers. Even in retirement, Jim remains active in the teaching profession, offering his expertise as a maternity substitute for District 214 and continuing his involvement as a committed union leader. Thank you for joining us, Jim. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Sam and Kelly, to have this conversation.
Thanks, Robin. Sam, Kelly, I'm excited to be a part of this journey into teaching with you as a veteran teacher and AFT trauma-informed trainer. Nothing I find more joyous than to work with teachers and helping them to support and better understand the learning needs of their students, particularly those who've experienced trauma. I'm curious as to why this topic is important for you to talk about today. And maybe, Kelly, you can start off.
Yeah, so I'm constantly thinking of how I can help my students get into the emotional space where they need to learn. I know that a lot of them are not, and if they're not in a state of well-being, they're worried about things about at home or what may be happening outside or even inside of the classroom sometimes, that if they're too distracted about these other things, they're not going to be in a place to learn, and rightfully so. Also, a big part of teaching in a unit is teaching students coping strategies, which will help them promote a lifelong of well-being. My students show their trauma through crisis behaviors a lot of the time, so my role is to help them maintain safety and teach regulation strategies that are going to help them function in society.
Sam, what about you?
I mean, I agree with everything Kelly said. Our students go through so much both in and outside the classroom. And, for me, I'm oftentimes thinking about, like, how do we balance high expectations in the classroom with the trauma-informed practice? And as I've learned more, those things really aren't separate, but it's still like, how do you balance high expectations with also knowing that there are a bunch of root causes to the behaviors you're seeing in the classroom? And, I often think, with everything that goes in our students' lives and the community, whether that be, illness or violence, grief and death, I'm sure those listening have had students going through those things, and, just thinking, like, how is school even important in those moments, right? How do we make our space important when, they're coming in with life experiences that tell them this isn't important? And honestly, classrooms some days may not be important compared to what they're going through. So, I really want to, this is important to me because I want to advance my skill set to better support my students in those times and be a trusted adult and leverage my relationships with the kids the best I can to help them out in those moments and continue helping them grow and learn.
Thank you for that, Kelly and Sam. As teachers, we run that balancing act, right? High expectations academically with the love and support, and developing these productive, loving, and supportive relationships with students is critical, particularly in boosting our students' resilience and helping them cope with adversity. And we can all agree, particularly in the students I serve, as well as the students you serve, that helping them cope with adversity and boosting their resilience is a key cornerstone. I'm interested in terms of what strategies you use in your day-to-day teaching to help foster and build these relationships. That'd be an important question. And Sam, I'd start off with you.
Yeah, I kind of already hinted to relationship building, and something I talked about in the last episode. I'm sure I'll talk about it in the next 6 as well. But I think it's incredibly important. And honestly, like the simple thing is just be kind. And I remember being in grad school, I was with some of my peers, and we were all chit-chatting like, man, we could just kind of summarize our entire grad school experience by 2 words: be kind. And obviously teaching's not that easy, but I think sometimes it really is that easy to build relationships because a lot of our kids don't have a whole lot of experiences with adults who are just being kind and being kind when they're not being kind. That often kind of surprises them, like, wow, I was just really mean to you and you're still being kind to me. Why are you doing that? I think that helps with the relationships a lot. I try to be myself and be funny and, be sarcastic in appropriate ways and, use my humor to connect with them. And then also just being present. I try to either be outside my door, if I'm not outside my door, right by my door, to get a little temperature check of where they are for the day so I can check in on them one-on-one if I need to. But I think, those little things just kind of add up. And again, at the core, it's just being kind, letting them see kindness and joy, especially in times when they're not expecting it.
And unconditional love, regardless if
That's
they're having a
right.
bad day or not, they're always there. And we'll be talking later on about the healing gestures, but you're demonstrating the number one healing gesture: comfort. Studies show that adults who provide consistent emotional and physical support can buffer students' fight or flight stress response. So your willingness to offer that compassionate, reassuring presence, such as starting right at the door, creates that safe environment that helps your students reestablish a sense of security and stability, which is so critical. You're also teaching them the importance of developing emotional intelligence and managing their emotions. And we'll talk more about that, another aspect of being a trauma-informed teacher that we'll address later. What about you, Kelly?
Well, with my students, I try to remind them daily that I'm there for them. Every morning we listen to an affirmation song, and I tell them I love them when they leave. And when crisis behaviors occur, I debrief by saying, you can make better decisions, but we still love you and we're still going to be there for you. My kids also really love Doggyland and will sing his affirmation songs and say that they're a being of love. So that's really nice to hear, that they can also know that they can give out love just as much as we can give them love. And we also do self check-ins in the morning to see how they're feeling. I have one student who shows crisis behaviors to test how far he can push me. But I again remind him, you can make better choices, but I'll still love you. And this has really shown in the past 2 months already how much it can change a behavior. Also, last year I used a process called How's Your Engine Running? It's geared more towards younger kids, but it provides a visual of a green, blue, and red engine light, and it asks how you're feeling and assigns a color to emotions. And I think it really helped my kids understand that what they're feeling will identify the first step. And then from there, we talk about what you can do in those situations. And I think it's good to help them get those steps in place to then move on from that. And I also like how you mentioned mistakes earlier, because I've had students, especially in my setting, it's hard with autism that students find it hard to make mistakes because it's not part of their expected outcomes. So I like to model how I respond and the appropriate way to respond. So I'll say like, oh, dang it, I made this mistake, but I can take a step back and try again. And it just shows them that I'm not perfect either and that we can all learn and grow together.
Absolutely. I love that reinforcement, Kelly. One decision doesn't negate our love and our care for our students. And continuing to display that same reaction can reassure our students that we truly care about them, and most importantly, they can trust you. Those are great examples of strategies you can use, especially helping students build their emotional intelligence, and how you help your students identify and label their feelings, which is critical to the social and emotional learning. Do you do anything with your students to develop an emotional vocabulary so they have the words uh, that best represents their feelings at that moment?
No, but I was thinking about how I could connect maybe a visual vocabulary or a shorter vocabulary for my students to help them be able to express how they're feeling, because I know earlier Sam was talking about how sometimes students might have a hard time wanting to discuss things, but in my room it might be hard for students to even, they might not be able to say something. They might not know how.
Yeah, you raise a good point. How do you help students who might not be able to, or maybe at the high school level, reluctant to share their emotions, like I've experienced? So, if you're looking to emphasize social emotional learning, it's imperative that as educators, we help them develop that vocabulary, help them to build a set of skills and nurture a mindset that helps them not only navigate these relationships, but also regulate emotions, but also to persist in the face of adversity. So there's a few things you can do there. For example, if they have difficulties, maybe putting those words in place, maybe we do a stamp the emoji that best represents your feeling at this time. There's other activities you can do, emotional word math, where you take two emotions and they blend them together. The movie Inside Out is a great example of being able to build off of that work that you were just talking about, and gives you more strategies by which you can utilize in getting those emotions out, and using the social emotional learning. It's just a key part of the trauma informed approach we can use as educators. Sam?
Yeah, well, I really like how Kelly talked about the formal check-ins, because that's just such a great opportunity, right? Like I used to do those and I've kind of steered away from, not intentionally, I think unintentionally. And, hearing this conversation and, um, those are great ideas to get things out of the students that either they don't want to share in front of a whole class, or they don't even want to share with you and through their voice, but writing it down is a little different. It's a little more private. So I think I can be more intentional about that. And Kelly, thanks for sharing that, because I love learning new strategies here. There are a couple other things I heard that I kind of wanted to touch on. Thinking a lot the past couple of weeks about trauma informed practices and things I've learned, and today even we had to talk about fight or flight. And I've started, one of my colleagues, he does meditating on Mondays with his kids. And but the way he does it, he did it in a department meeting once where we walked in and he had meditation music on, the lights were off, and he was meditating as we walked in. So there was a few of us walking in and we're chit-chatting. And as soon as we got in, it just kind of like sucked the energy out of us. We're like, oh, we don't want to disturb him, whatever. We sat down quiet, we were respectful. And then, he got done. He's like, what you just did, the kids do. When they walk in and see me doing this, it just kind of like calms them down. Cause, kids don't, I mean, most of the time, they're not trying to give you a hard time intentionally, right? So I started to do this the past couple of days, and it really, like, is it perfect? No, but like, it really does help a lot. So I think I'm going to do it every day. I like, no joke. So today I did it, and they're like, why are you doing this? And we talked about box breathing, breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds. And they did it, and it really had a calm start to our class. And we got to talk about fight or flight and what that is, what it means, how we can counteract that with the breathing and the meditating. So that's been great. In the couple of days I've started class like that, I have seen a difference. And I think that kind of leads into, Jim, you mentioned the healing gestures and some of those. I think we could all benefit by you kind of getting into more depth about what those mean and how we could utilize them in the class.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that your colleague has taken the time out and just doing it. That's what one of my colleagues did on Wednesday morning before school started in professional development days. He just set aside 10 minutes. Anybody from in adults wanted to attend the 10-minute session, he would show a 10-minute clip from YouTube on mindfulness, and we would just do our thing and set our intentions for the day, and off we went. So absolutely do that, as well as those 4 square breathing techniques you could do in between classes. And then what you're doing, like, hey, we're not putting it on the kids. They're seeing me doing it. When you could teach those coping skills and those regulation skills, that is outstanding through modeling. But getting to the point of the healing gestures, I view trauma-informed practice as a framework that aims to create a culture in both the classroom and the school where all students feel safe and can succeed. And so the idea of healing gestures comes from the Changing Mind campaigns, from the Futures Without Violence. And these are simple practices or healing gestures that can help protect our children from the effects of violence, abuse, neglect, hunger, and other adverse conditions by which they're coming from. The first one is listening, and I've heard a lot from both of you, Sam and Kelly, just knowing that you're there and that the students have someone to talk to. And most importantly, that you're listening and that you're validating them as human beings. And it's so important, whether children share their emotions or not, having someone truly listens matters. And not only listening, but sitting in there when there's in that moment of pain where you say nothing, and being okay with sitting in that. Comfort is another one. And we spoke earlier when Sam met his students at the door, safety and stability, obviously the same basic principles that comfort us as adults. And so greatly help kids. So particularly those experience traumatic stress. Collaboration is another healing gesture. And one of the challenges is, how do you teach collaboration to children? And those who have experienced traumatic stress or violence may struggle with understanding someone else's point of view. So bring them into a conversation, most importantly, working together to establish clear roles and expectations. Help give your students some choice, shows them that their opinions matter. And so in addition to fostering the development of positive self-identity, celebrations are also going to be critical in helping children cope with adversity. And this can be accomplished by not only celebrating achievements, but getting back to a little bit of what Kelly said, embracing failures, celebrate those, praise and validate them for little as well as big successes, as well as failures. Remember to focus on the process and not so much perfection. That's going to be the key. So based on what I've heard from all of you, you're not just here to deliver the curriculum or pass the test. You obviously see your role as helping your students dream big, and inspirational teaching is really the key to all this, that you're striving to reach out and connect with children and give your kids that you work with hope to reimagine what is possible in their lives and change their minds from maybe having a low self-esteem to a higher self-esteem, from fear to hope. Those are all key ingredients to building resiliency. Let's talk a little bit about collaboration. Sam, I'd be interested to know a little bit more about what you do in your class to promote that collaboration between you and your students.
I will say, it may be my biggest challenge, honestly, is getting the kids to collaborate with each other. And especially, I think about a class I have right now where, there are a lot of unwanted behaviors in that class. And I know that, a lot of the students in that class, are definitely going through traumatic experiences, just from things they've shared or things that we've learned through team meetings. And those behaviors can be quite distracting, especially when there are a lot of them happening at once. And, I just think about like where, we mentioned it earlier, like where's the line of, how to prioritize high expectations, with accountability, with love. And, I have a bunch of kids in that class who are ready to learn. They get frustrated when these behaviors are happening. sometimes I do, like, sometimes I just have to send kids out of the room, and then I have to, work back with them to keep the relationships and talk about why it happened and kind of restore what's going on. But I want to figure out how I do better of, like, how do I keep those kids in the room, right? How can we learn with them in the room? And how can I get them involved in collaborating productively with others? Honestly, vulnerably, like, I'm struggling, generally with that aspect of it.
And you hit the nail on the head. How do we, what I've seen, particularly after COVID, is a lot of high school students just have retreated into their phones, and the social skills have just, you'll have 15, 20 people in a room and nobody will be talking to each other. So what you have to do, or what I found very influential in my teaching, this started early on, is providing experiential learning activities day one. You know how you use icebreakers and then people kind of forget those. We embed these experiential learning activities tied with the curriculum where they have to work together to collaboratively solve a problem or solve a challenge and it could be something as simple as, hey, within 60 seconds, I want this team to develop X, Y, and Z. Go. And so they're not competing against each other, competing against the clock. So if you can incorporate these experiential learning activities within literally everything, whether you want to use that as an icebreaker, you want to use that as a mid activity if things are going down, or use this to introduce concepts in education, get them off the start of working collaboratively together, even creating your classroom rules and how we're going, or norms, and how we're going to approach it. And then also how we're going to address if those are violated through talking circles and other things you can do that are all hands-on experiential. The more you can get them out of their seats, working with other students, working where they can't even find you in a room because you're immersed in that process as well, the better you're going to go in terms of reaching them. And you set that tone from day one, and you don't let up until the last day. And on the last day, you bring the talking circle together, hand them the peace poll, and have them talk. What did you experience from that? And I think those are really some of the keys that you can at least start that collaborative process with them, and then work your way through on an individual basis, having them identify their triggers to class triggers and everything in between, and just start the process there. How about you, Kelly?
I kind of have a similar issue to Sam, but it's kind of reversed. So in my class, if a student is showing a crisis behavior, I remove the rest of the class to not give the student an audience. But now I have some students that seem to be a little scared of these other students, or maybe a little traumatized, and I'm not sure how to make them feel comfortable. I know they feel safe and they know that we'll protect them, but I don't know how to make them feel comfortable with this other student in the same classroom.
Interesting situation. The first priority obviously is de-escalation of the crisis behavior. And if you're in a co-teaching situation, which I believe that you are, that might mean your para is going to stay with the student while you're removing the students. And once removed, how then do you regulate the emotions of the students, all the students? How do you regain that calm emotions and those behaviors? And you said something important. You've already established that trust, so that's critical. Your strategy should align with the student's capacity at that moment. So first, assessing the student's regulation, coming back door again on what Sam was talking, the breathing exercises, relaxing the shoulders, the jaws, your tone of voice, and that communicates, hey, we're in control here. It's calm, it's caring. And once regulated, you then can relate by listening, developing that trust, and they're expecting that consistency, which you have already built. And if you have built that healthy relationship that's both healthy and safe and trusting, you could then introduce the problem solving, working collaboratively with the class then to solve the problems of, hey, how do we get back to where we were at? What's it going to take? What are the appropriate boundaries and consequences?
Yeah, Jim, there's something you mentioned. Well, a couple of things, addressing things like right up front, and working through things with students immediately, and doing, kind of the de-escalation immediately in these instances. At the middle school level, I think about, times where things get a little crazy, like right before class, like there's a fight in the hallway, and it doesn't even have to be a student in my class, right? It could be fight in the hallway. Now I got kids in the class. They're either cheering on the fight or trying to video the fight, or that's their friend in the fight. So now they're upset. Fighting's a trigger for them, right? It just throws everything off. And I think addressing that immediately and not just pretending like nothing happened, but like talking about like, listen, this class is off. Like how many, I think about a moment where there was a fight in the hallway and I just had kids raise their hand, like, who's ready to learn right now? No one raised their hand. They're like, no, and they know that. And, um, you know, I, I wish in that moment I would have gone to the box breathing and the meditation. And, I had a good conversation with them and I've had good conversations in these moments, but, I really think now, like I am just going to do total resets in a different way. Like we're going to really just sit in silence. We're going to play some meditation music. We're going to do the breathing and with a purpose to like giving the kids a why, like not like, oh, like we're just doing it because Mr. Ramey's weird and he likes to peace and quiet. Like, no, like there's a why. Like we're actually like trying to get our bodies out of this fight or flight mode. We're actually trying to calm ourselves down so our brains are ready to learn.
I love it. Here, I'll challenge you. Have a list of your go-to strategies, things that you can definitely do, grounding activities, the breathing piece, thought challenges. You mentioned you do a lot of writing. A thought challenge, right now on paper, write your negative thoughts, then list reasons why they might not be true, and have them talk about this. If you can pull it out, if they're not willing to do it, in a discussion or in a talking circle, the journaling piece, because you're right, you're not going to get to the learning if we're not there ready to learn in a feeling safe, secure, positive mindset. You teach history and the mentioning of maybe taking a look at historical figures and how they navigated through difficult times, and then and analyze their processes by which they help to regulate that or at least solve the issue. So there's multiple ways you can go, and I would suggest having that go-to approach and having a list of strategies. And to build off of what I said earlier to Kelly about regaining calm, ensuring that physical environment is conducive for regulation. So even in from the posters on your wall to the lighting of your room to just the whole vibe you create really is going to also play a pivotal role.
Yeah, I do have a calming corner in my room, and I have my incense going, and I have the fluorescent light covers. That is a forest. So I'm trying to make the good vibes in my room. It doesn't always work, but it's there. And I do have a crisis plan that includes who's responsible for what activity and what student when something does occur, so that we're not in the moment trying to scramble and figure out what's going on. We're consistent every time.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned your para. Talk more about how you work with other educators or support staff in your school to support your students. I think that's asking for assistance or ideas really a challenge, but I'm interested in how you're able to work collaboratively with other educators and support personnel.
Well, this year I'm new at my school, and I have two pairs that are returning from last year in the same classroom. So they are a wide wealth of knowledge for my students, and they've really helped me this year kind of get to know them at a quicker rate than maybe typical, which is nice. And last year I was in a unique situation where I started an autism unit at a school that didn't have one before. And as a first year teacher, I also didn't have a great wealth of knowledge to pull from. So I ruffled some feathers last year, and not a lot of people understood what I was doing. So I didn't really have that big of a that big of a team left on my side. So my student support manager actually was really helpful, and she found people to come to my room and help me. She connected me with a psychiatrist at the Children's Hospital, and our district also has a behavior team that came out and kind of helped me analyze what was going on and why. And then we also have an autism team that comes out and helps support in any way that they can, from resources to lessons to ideas of helping with behaviors. And, I'll try anything that anybody has to recommend because I'm a second year teacher and who knows, something random might work.
And like we've been talking about, the failures work just as well. And if I can give you any advice, just be gentle on yourself. It takes 5 years just to figure out not only the curriculum, but the pacing, the instruction, all of the other things they ask you to do. The thing you don't want to do is put more pressure on yourself. But I love the fact that you ruffle feathers because challenging the status quo is okay because you have the best interests of your students in mind. If you're leading with the heart, it's going to be bruised at points. That's why, self-care is critical, but you're in it for the right reasons. So, identify your allies, bring those folks together, collaborate to build that trauma-informed classroom. It really starts by asking questions as a group. Can we all agree that addressing trauma can help our children be more ready to learn? Can we also agree that improving our children's problem-solving skills will benefit them, especially self-regulation and managing behaviors? After that, I think about what's needed to get you and your team trained, so critical for professional development so that you all have a shared understanding as well as language around trauma informed. We've only scratched the surface here as we talk about, what we can control in our classrooms, but there's so many layers to this that, you're going to have to get additional information. You keep building like you would your tool set, and every day and every month, you're just building more in there. Remember, this takes time. So be gentle with yourself and you're doing the right things for kids, and keep that in mind. What about you, Sam? Are you talking to other teachers to help you?
I wish I was doing more of that. Um, I think it's hard as a new teacher to, I don't know, well, one, Kelly, I'll just say, like, super proud of you for doing the ruffling the feathers, because it's hard when you're young, and like that's something I've been struggling with too. Like, how do I start these conversations when I don't have all the answers, I don't know anything, but I see approaches that just aren't working or even harmful at times. Um, and Jim, I think the way you framed it is perfect. Just starting with simple points of common ideas, right? Like we can agree on this, right? Okay, well, let's go here. We can agree on this. Let's go here. And just continuing those conversations so we can just be building bit by bit. I think I lucked into kind of some communication with other staff. I coach with our social worker at our school, and we've become pretty decent friends over the past couple of years, and that's just been huge. I'm able to go to him with a lot of different questions, a lot of different ideas. He's able to come to me with information that is helpful for how to navigate my classroom. And obviously there's some things he can and can't tell me, but he does his very best to help me be prepared, and we kind of are able to talk through different strategies and how to address different students. There have been times where he's come in and sat in my room, and because the kids love him. Like, we talked about using the word love. Like, he reminds those kids every day that he loves them. Like, any interaction, like, even if it's bad, he's like, all right, now get to class, love you. And like it's just that, like, the kids eat it up, and because they need that. And I'm trying to use that word more too appropriately. Like, yeah, like, I do love you. Like, we're here to love you. Like, that's our job. And so he's been able to come to my class and kind of be with the kids that he knows need some extra help, and he's an extra set of hands. So I'm thankful for that relationship. I'm going to push myself to have some of the harder conversations, and Jim, the way you framed it, I think will make it a lot easier, to where it's not like I'm ruffling feathers, but like we're in it together, and we're all trying to help the kids the best we can.
Yeah, and look, you're providing that support for kids. Who's supporting you? And it's awesome that you have both have strong support systems. I mentioned earlier, yeah, we're not asking you to replace the psychologist or the social worker or the counselor. Work together. You could be a stopgap to be able to, maybe see certain behaviors, working collectively or collaboratively with the student service professionals, and build that partnership. That's key, which takes us back to the first healing gesture we talked about, listening. Part of that is being aware of how listening to others' traumas can affect you. And so I want to discuss the impact that it has on educators. As I mentioned, this is emotional work, and everyone is at risk because our emotions are contagious. So even if we have excellent coping skills, right, we're interacting with people on a daily basis who don't, and we're going to catch a lot of these emotions. So, self-care is going to be critical for this work, because if you're providing that emotional support for your students, you have to be right as well. And we have a tendency sometimes as teachers to say, oh yeah, I'll do that. And yeah, I'll volunteer for that. And I'll be on that committee. And before you know it, there's no time in your life for you. So I'm curious, how do you manage your own stress? And do you have some self-care routines or other supports to help buffer you or protect you from stress? Kelly, I'll start with you.
Well, I've been known to use the calm down corner myself. I have indeed cried at school, and I like to think that I'm modeling how to calm down. I have the breathing posters over there, and I'll go over in the corner and I'll calm myself down, and hopefully they'll learn from it.
I love it. Yeah, burn sage. There's a lot we can learn from the indigenous tribes and their methods. Again, bringing that into the classroom as a learning tool, but also as a way to work in real time with incorporating that in the work you do. Sam, what about you?
I think for me, it's exercise, honestly, that kind of helps. And I think my wife is somewhere and she's probably eavesdropping and she's probably laughing because she sent me a text today and she's like, I think you need to go for a run. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So, obviously you can always do better. But, I like what Kelly said, because, there's just a sense of vulnerability in that and doing that at school. And I think, Kelly, you modeling that at school and you doing the little calm down corner yourself is awesome. And that's something that, I'm going to, try to do more of as well. And, things we can model to the kids, and honestly, things the kids can model to us. I had a student this year who was real upset, came into class, and she was doing the breathing. And she didn't learn it from me. We hadn't practiced the breathing at that point. But like she was like real upset, ready to fight, and then just sat down and started breathing. And like kids were asking her, like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm counting my breaths. And I was like, that is awesome. Like you are doing something most adults don't do, and you're 12. So like, it's great. And I think modeling these things are great and might help kids. Honestly, it's kind of vice versa. That kid modeled it for me to help me model it for kids, and it's kind of a circle. So I think, we can all model it to each other. I know I kind of went off of the question, but Kelly bringing that up, I just wanted to state that because I think that's really cool.
No, you didn't go off, because look, life, here we are living, and we can all agree that we as adults are facing adverse experiences. And if we're facing it, our kids are facing this. So rather than not talk about it, it's okay to talk about these adverse experiences. And more importantly, it's okay to share these are common reactions to these adverse experiences, and normalize this discussion and teach kids about the impact of trauma as well as stress that goes unmitigated. These are the things that we should, as educators, do. And there's multiple ways you can incorporate that, either through health, either through your lessons, bringing in the student services, but make these discussions, normalize the discussions. The fact you're sharing that with students, I'm sure there's 5 or 6 other kids going, yeah, I have that same issue. So now we build these commonalities and we find out we have more in common than we have in terms of differences. And I guess this all points to the final healing gesture, which is inspiring. inspiration, think about somebody in your life that inspired you. I'm sure you became teachers, or you took the path that you did in school because there was somebody that was there to inspire you. So I'm curious, I think of ways that you can show your students how much you care for them is in itself inspiring. So starting from that basis, but I'm just curious, I mentioned earlier the go-to strategies. I forgot to mention accessing the higher self by doing something for other people. Maybe that's starting a custodian appreciation day for your school where the kids gather, and now we're going to highlight a custodian that does great work. So it could be as simple as showing that kind of support to doing something that helps the school, the community, and brings people that maybe do not have a light shine. So I'm curious, inspiring. What are your thoughts on that concept of inspiring?
For me, I think it's just a constant reminder uh to show up every day, with love and kindness on your mind. Because that in itself is inspiring to the kids. And my first year teaching was, a lot of ups and downs. I'm so grateful for the experience. I had a student who um we just didn't get along. Like I tried so hard. I really, really tried. And she was not having it. Like I really can't think of a day where we got along. And like she just I felt like she just had it out for me. I was like, this I don't know what I did because I'm really just trying to love you. But you don't like me. And you can't take it personal. They're kids. But like the last day of school, she came up to me. And again, we didn't have really much of a positive interaction all year. The last day of school, she came up to me and gave me a hug, which in itself was bizarre. I was like, okay, yeah, of course I'll give you a hug, but this is weird. Um, and then was just like, she said something like, hey, I know I gave you so much trouble. We never got along really. But I just wanted you to know that you're the only one who pushed me every day to be great. And then she wanted my number because I was moving. This was in Chicago, and absolutely gave her my number. And we're still, that was 2 years ago. And we still, you know, I don't know, every couple months, every 3, 4 months, she'll either check in with me or I'll check in with her. And like I would have never thought that was where that relationship was going. But that has always been, that kind of tidbit has always been a reminder to me of like always show up with love, regardless of how, crappy the situation and the behavior is in the moment. Because to a kid, it just means more. Even if for 182 days, you didn't have a single good day, well, maybe in their head, you just showing up every day was something worth it. Because to a kid, it just means more. Even if for 182 days, you didn't have a single good day, well, maybe in their head, you just showing up every day was something worth it. And obviously some days it's hard to remember that even after having that experience. So keep showing up with love and kindness.
And make sure you take care of yourself. So go out for that run. Make sure these
Absolutely.
become part of the habits that you do in addition to every day. With school, you have X, Y, and Z to do. Make you a priority, because to do this work, it is soul crushing at times. And if you're not rejuvenating, then no one else is going to come to your rescue. So you have to do that for you, and you're worth it because you're changing lives. Kelly.
Mine, I'm thinking of what I try to inspire my kids, and it's not as grandiose as Sam's story, but I think I explicitly tell kids every day something great about them, and I send daily communication logs home to their families, and I try to write at least one good thing. And I can think of today on one of my students, I wrote great leader, because we follow the 7 habits of happy kids at my school, and one of them is to be a leader. So it shows that he's following that and showing other kids that he can be great. So hopefully you'll stick with it.
Imagine the parent that opened that up and read it. So, your work's not, it's like a ripple effect. It just goes on and on. And I guess at the end of the day, this is the profession we've chosen. I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity as a veteran teacher. Your phone doesn't ring very often, and that's a story for another day. But just to listen to you, it's inspiring and reminds me of why I became a teacher. And I wish you all the best in your journey.
Yeah, Sam and Kelly and Jim, like I've been inspired by all of you. So thank you for this conversation, but we've reached the end of our time together. I just really love hearing how much you care about your students and just every day go and try to create that positive environment so they can learn. Thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable again with us here. So Jim, thanks for your expertise. It's been fabulous having you here to share what you know. Sam and Kelly are going to join us next time. Looking forward to it with another expert. And until then, for all our listeners, you can once again go to sharemylesson.com/AFT new teachers. You can talk more about this on our discussion board to share your own stories, ask questions, or just network with other educators. So join us there and then join us next time here on Welcome to Teaching.